welcome everybody. This is our third webinar. You can hear me okay? Would you click the raise the hand button on the My Mood indicator at the top of the screen? Give you all a chance to adjust the volume on your end. All right, we got a pretty busy schedule for tonight. Let me get my outline ready here. Okay, again, this is our third webinar for Microsoft Project Streamlined, and once again, thank you very much for choosing this course. I appreciate that very much. My goal is to make the training not only informative, but to improve your skills and hopefully do it in a way that's not only focused but enjoyable for you as a student. And of course, the near-term focus for these webinars is to have everybody ready for the all-day session. So got a lot to cover tonight in the task linking mechanics section of the course. Again, the first webinar was the kickoff. The second we did on navigation, and tonight this third webinar on section 2 is the task linking lectures, which are obviously an absolutely key foundation to using Microsoft Project. What I'm going to start out with is a couple of quiz questions on the task linking section. We'll see how everybody did. That'll get everybody warmed up. That shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes. And then I'm going to move into reviewing the 11 different videos that were available for this section. And I will stop and talk about and demonstrate key points in those videos to help reinforce the learning. And at the end, I'll do some preparation for next week as the complexity picks up a little bit next week. We get into the critical path method and outlining, which are excellent topics. I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And if we still have time at the end of the hour, I've got a lot to cover here. I'm going to pull up some quick tips, some value-added information about Microsoft Project I'll fill in at the end. That's pretty much how the hour will go. And so I'm going to move on down and pop up a poll. Let me find my poll questions. Now, I've got it worded wrong. Okay, I'm gonna start the voting. Okay, so what the question should say is, once you link a task to another task, you can never change it. True or false? And so click on your choice, submit your vote. See how many votes we get here. That was an easy one for you guys. You guys got that. It's false, of course. That's one of the things about Microsoft Project. As you make links, that's all about being able to change them so that you can get other relationships set up in your schedule. All right, let's try one that's a little harder. Let's see if I got this one worded right. All right. Yeah, this one's a little harder. When you insert a task between two tasks in your schedule, and those two tasks are already linked, the existing links change. So your choices are no. The existing links remained undisturbed. Yes. The links adjust to the inserted task. Or choice number 3, perfect consultant/project management response. It depends. Depends on what you have set up in the backstage. And then the last one is, I don't know. So we'll see what we get here. Make your choices. Actually, the correct answer is number 3. It depends. Inserting a task is actually controlled. I'm going to bring up Microsoft Project in the backstage. Under File, the backstage is the File tab, and under the Options, you want to go to the Schedule tab, and in there is a checkbox you can either turn on or off that says inserted tasks are either auto-linked or they're not. And so depending on whether you have that box checked or not will determine if the links change or don't change. When you split the screen, in the lower pane of the split screen view, any changes I make are automatically reflected in the Gantt chart view. True, false, it depends, or I don't know. All right, you guys are catching on to me. It depends. The thing about the split screen, so I'm going to stop the voting here. Microsoft Project again. So when you do a split screen, so I'll put in a couple tasks here, and I'll stay on task 2, and over on the View tab, you have to click the Details box to get your screen split. And I'll go to the Formatting tab, the Gantt chart tools. Oops, I got to be in the bottom form, sorry. And switch it to predecessors and successors. The question was, if I change something in the lower screen, does it automatically change the Gantt chart? Well, here I'm going to change the duration to 4 days, and nothing happens. It's kind of a trick question until you click OK. Now you may say, well, Kevin, if I'd have changed it up in the top screen, I had to hit OK too, which in a way is similar but not. For example, if I wanted to make task 3 a successor and change the duration, I can make all these changes, but if I'm in the bottom screen, I have to hit OK. Whereas if I do that in the top screen, It's just a matter of making the change and it automatically happens. So the thing there is the split screen has this curiosity that you have to hit the OK button if you're going to get it to write to the database. So, all right, I swear to you, this will be the last quiz I do for tonight. If a task has more than one predecessor, when you look at the predecessor column in the Gantt chart table, you'll see those task numbers separated by a comma. True, false, or what's a predecessor? Okay, you guys all got that one. Yep, when you have multiple predecessors, or successors, yes, they are separated by a comma in the Gantt chart view, in the Gantt chart table. So let me close the polling here. Let me bring back up Microsoft Project. And you can actually see it here where if I made task 2 and 3 a successor to the first task. If I do it in the lower panel, you can see it. I select them in individual rows, but in the upper panel it separates it with a comma. Okay, so you guys did pretty good there. I'm going to jump out of the quizzes now and go to the course material. Last week we went through creating a basic schedule, how to zoom, working with the time scale, which is important to know how to do basic Gantt chart navigation, table column essentials, how to avoid the task resource functionality with the text 1 field, and then we did a closeout, and there's also an additional lecture in there that shows you what the default options in project should be. Okay, so for tonight, the first lecture was on task entry essentials, and that covered the 2 common things you don't want to do when entering a task, and that's typing in the start and finish columns accidentally. As what you do is you set up a constraint. The other thing you have to watch out for is to pay attention to what task mode you're in and not to be accidentally in the manual scheduling mode. Alright, and then that lecture closed out with some different ways to rename a task, insert a task, and other essentials. But I want to cover the 2 key items in there, so let me bring up project. And what I see a lot of beginners do is they will go right in that start column and they'll go, well, I want that to start on July the 15th. And if you don't know how to use Microsoft Project, that's not a good thing to do, because what you've done is you've created what's called a start no earlier than constraint. So by typing in the start column, you've actually turned on the constraint functionality, which can drastically impact your schedule, and you may not know it. So for example, if I was to change the project start date by going to project information, and I move that start date back to, say, June the 3rd of last month, nothing's going to move. And you know why? Because you've got this constraint sitting out here, this task start no earlier than constraint, and you've turned it on accidentally. So the second part of that video said, well, suppose I've created a calendar icon and a constraint. How do I get rid of it? Well, the trick there is to double click on the task, as the video covered. Go to the Advanced tab, and you'll do this a lot if you've done this accidentally, and go into the constraint type section and turn it back to an as soon as possible constraint by highlighting that and selecting it. That's the subtle point here, is there is no such thing as not having a constraint. Actually, every task has a constraint by default, and it is the as soon as possible constraint. So to get rid of it, you actually have to reset it. Okay, so that's the one important thing. The other thing you got to watch out for, the video went through, is make sure you're always in automatic scheduling mode. When you're not in automatic scheduling mode, if you've accidentally turned a task into manual scheduling mode, you'll see the little push pin. Now you may wonder, well, what's the big deal? Well, Microsoft Project has this sophisticated scheduling engine inside of it. And if you're just using manual scheduled tasks, you might as well be using a spreadsheet. There's nothing wrong with using this feature, but if you're a beginner, you're spending $1,000 for this product and you're not using it to its full potential by turning on manual scheduling mode. So the video went through what the problem is here. So you need to watch for push pins. The most common way of creating a manual scheduled task is actually when you get into creating summary tasks. It's very easy to turn those on, and that actually was covered in the video. So the easy way to fix a task that's in manual schedule mode is simply to click the down arrow and switch it back to auto scheduled. And you should always make sure your new tasks are set to schedule in auto schedule mode at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to go on to the next lecture, and that was working with durations. Alright, so pretty straightforward lecture. Let me bring up project. There are basically 4 types of durations. There's the 1 minute duration, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, and there's one I told you not to use that was called 1 month, and that's because of the variability you can get in defining a month. So basically there's 4 different types of duration estimates. I'm in the IT business. If I'm scheduling tasks in 1 minute increments, there's something wrong with me. Often a rule of thumb is you should never have durations less than 2.5% of the total project duration. So if you have a 2-year project schedule, that means you shouldn't have anything less than 2.5 weeks as a duration. So that's kind of a rule of thumb that could help determine if you're getting too detailed. You always want to make sure you're not creating a simulation when you create a project schedule. You're creating a schedule to manage things. But it's, the good thing is, if you need tasks down as little as a minute, you can do that. And the interesting one, of course, was the E-day. So, for example, if I have a 4 E-day task, and let's say I'm going to go ahead and have it start on Friday, and I have a regular task that's just 4 days, and have it also start on Friday. You can see the subtle difference here is the E-day doesn't pay any attention to the project calendar. It works right through the weekends. So that's a great type of duration type to use in things such as machines. Okay, so it's one a lot of people aren't aware of, but you can have E minutes, E hours, E days, E weeks. It all comes in very handy when you need to turn on a machine and it's going to run constantly. Alright, so that was durations. Let me go on to the next lecture. I told you we're going to clip right along in here, so I'm covering these things fairly quickly. Hopefully you're able to watch the videos, and this is a good way to backfill that information or reinforce it. So on lecture 13, it covered the basic concept of task sequences and what a predecessor is and what a successor is. Believe it or not, there's some people that have difficulty with that concept. Most project managers that have done it for a while, it comes pretty naturally. One of the tips that were in the video was to insert the successor column next to the predecessor column. That gives you a great dashboard. It gives you what comes before, what comes after, and the split screen also reinforces that. That's a great view. The key, of course, with linking is it's what helps you create dynamic schedules. Alright, so one of the best ways to think of linking if you're having troubles with predecessors and successors is to think of a relay race. And say you're the second or third runner. Well, if you're the third runner, runner number 2 is your predecessor, and runner number 4 is your successor. If you're the third runner, runner number 1 is also a predecessor to you, but he's not the one that's going to hand you the baton. It's the next one in sequence. So that whole concept of doing things in sequence is very much a key to creating a schedule in Microsoft Project. And if you look on the screen here, let me get rid of these rows. This first task, it has 2 successors, tasks 2 and 3. It creates the right schedule. I mean, it starts on Monday and it finishes through the following Monday. And the fact that I put in a second successor of task 3 following for task 1 didn't hurt the schedule. If I take it off, I get the same schedule. So the comforting thing is, if you aren't sure if something's a successor or not, and you're wondering if it's going to mess up your schedule, in situations where it's somewhat redundant, in other words, runner number 1 and runner number 2 are my predecessor, if you put them both in, Project figures it out. It just makes your schedule much busier, and if you have problems, there's more to troubleshoot. But the comforting thing there is, if you're unsure, you can put in additional successors and you'll still get the right schedule. Okay, so that's enough on the basics of linking. Again, all that's covered in the videos, so I don't want to spend a lot of time there. The real payoff in this section of the lectures is, and this has been my experience in teaching the class, is that task linking dashboard. In other words, using that split screen. There's a number of people I've run into that have used the product over the years and didn't even know you could do that. And so the basic layout I give you here is a split screen with the task form in the bottom. And in the videos, it goes through a very clever way of going through the details options to set up additional views, so you have a simple task form, a more complex form, and then an extremely complex form that gives you more data. That's a great video to go and rewatch. One of the other things that people don't really catch in the split view is there are other views available, and one I like to use, and I'll show it to you here, which was not in the videos, was something called the relationship diagram. There it is there. So again, what I've done is I've got a split screen, and rather than a task form in the bottom, I'm going to right click on that vertical title bar, go into more views, and switch it to the relationship diagram. Now what does that give you? It gives you a very nice way of looking at, in a PERT chart or post-it note view, what all the predecessors to a task are and what the successors are. And of course, just like in the other split view, it changes with each task as you click on it. So that can be a helpful addition to your split screen technique. And I usually also, on the task tab on the ribbon, I also turn on the inspector. It gives you additional information about what's driving a task. That's a tough view to beat. Okay, so what's the importance here of having a split view? Well, let me go to a new blank schedule, and I'll do the basic marketing example. I'll just do concept, review, product design. Then we've reviewed the concept of the product we're going to make. We designed the product. Now we're going to manufacture it. And while the manufacturing is going on, we got to do the marketing. And then we're ready for our first sale. That again was in the video. So this is a somewhat complex schedule. I'm going to have it start on Monday of next month. So I got to go to the project tab, project information. Oh, I'm going to have it start on September. Let's go October 7th. And I'm going to need my split screen. So I go to the View tab, click the Details button, get that split in place. If I don't have the right predecessor and successor look, I can go to the task form and pick it up on the ribbon tab, or I can right click and pick predecessors and successors. And with this split screen, it becomes very easy. Okay, what comes after concept review? Well, the successor is product design. What's next? Product design is followed by, it has two successors: manufacturing and marketing. And so when I get to manufacturing, all I got to figure out is what comes after that. Well, that would be first sale. Marketing has the same situation. And then by doing all that, I've actually created the predecessors for the first sale. And so you can see you get some complex linking going on, but when you break it apart with the split screen, it makes it a lot easier to figure out the logic, because you're just concentrating on what comes before it, what comes after it, and it's almost like you're threading a complex carpet. And I'll tell you, I've worked with my own projects and some of our other enterprise project managers, and they get into these very nasty project schedules, and they go, "Kevin, how do we straighten this out?" And I go, "Well, let's split the screen. Let's go through each individual task, look at the predecessor, look at the successor." And I can't tell you the number of times, and no matter how nasty it was, sometimes it takes a long time, we were able to clean up the schedule and get a workable schedule as a result. So knowing how to use that split screen is essential for troubleshooting. And then if you're looking just for some additional input, you go, why is that task doing that? Why is it starting on Wednesday? Sometime turning on the inspector, and you go, okay, manufacturing has a predecessor of product design. Oh, yeah, that's right. It has to. We got to wait for the design before it goes. Or if there's a constraint on it, you'll actually see it in the task inspector. And here's an interesting one. First sale has two predecessors, manufacturing and marketing. But if manufacturing goes up to 2 days, for example, and I go back down to the first sale, look what it does. It tells me, yep, it's got one predecessor task. And you're going, well, it's got one predecessor task driving it. It actually has two predecessors in its rear view window. So with the inspector gives you driving information, whereas the split window is going to give you logical information, and that combination can actually help you a lot in troubleshooting. Going kind of fast here, but the other thing to be careful with when you're using that split screen, it throws a lot of people, is make sure when you're, like, if you wanted to change the lower pane, you have to activate it, and it's very subtle. You have to click on, for example, the task form to get it highlighted. So if you wanted to get to the task form tools, And I've seen a lot of people, they're in the Gantt chart and they go, oh, I want to change the view there. I want to go to a relationship diagram, for example. Oops, I did it in the wrong place. Well, they'll accidentally turn it on in the top form, top pane, because they didn't have it activated. So that's something to watch out for. And after you do it a couple times, you'll adjust to it. All right. The next lecture, lecture number 16, was manipulating the auto-linking feature. And that came up in the quiz again. That's just about that backstage option under File, Options, under the Schedule options, whether you have the auto-link on or not. So let me go ahead and do a quick demonstration here of what's going on with that. And let me take down this duration so it's a little easier to see. Okay, so I'm in between task 1 and task 2, and I'm going to insert a task. A lot of different ways to do it. I'm just going to use the insert key on my keyboard, and I'm going to put in new task. Okay, the fact that it automatically linked it between task 2 and 3 is related to the fact that under File, Options, on the Schedule tab, I have auto link or inserted or moved task. Okay, it's checked. So let me cancel that. Let me undo that insertion. And now with it back to the way it was, let me, before I do the insertion, go back to File, Options, Schedule tab, and let me clear that box. Alright, now when I insert the new task, notice now there's no links involved. Now, so what's the subtle tip here? Depending on whether you want Project to drop links in for you, so you don't have to do the work, you're going to have that checkbox checked. Where if you want total control, it's simply a matter of you going into the File, Options, Backstage, of course, Schedule section, and turning that on or off as you need it. Okay, so you control whether the links happen or not. And it actually has the same impact on moving. So for example, this task here, if I have the auto link on or off, back to Schedule, see, notice it says Move Task. So if I now move this task down, since I had it checked, it keeps the links for me. Whereas if I would have had it unchecked, it would have broke the link as I moved the task. Little subtle things, just knowing that auto linking feature there is helpful to know. Alright, on to lag and lead time. The important thing with lag and lead time, let me bring up Microsoft Project, is that it's just another way to push a task out. So if I wanted to increase the space between task 2 and task 3, I could put in a lag time, and there it puts in a buffer. Now, I personally try not to use lags. I try to put in a task so it's clearly identified. I once met a very clever project manager down in Huntsville, Alabama. I asked him, I go, how are you doing with keeping all your projects on schedule? Well, he did two things. He made the last couple of days of every month a holiday, and he stuck in a lot of lags in between his tasks. And I go, well, don't you ever get caught? He goes, no, none of my managers know how to read the hieroglyphics in the successors column. I thought that was pretty funny. But I mean, there's a lot of statistical theory out there that tells you if your project takes 1 year, the normal overrun is going to be 50%. And he was actually applying that in a practical way, only he wasn't telling anybody. But the interesting thing there is now you're able to read lags and lead, and lags are obvious. You now see that it pops up with a plus sign. There is no such thing as a lag or a lead field. A lag, of course, is a positive number and a okay. What I want to finish out with tonight, so we've got all the basics with linking here, the mechanical part. The key thing is, don't type in the start and finish column. Save that till we cover the constraints in 2 more classes. Once you understand constraints, then you can type in start and finish and you'll understand it completely. because that's one way to create a constraint. So, but if you're just creating links, don't do it. And if you got other project managers and you see they have nothing but calendars in the indicator column, you know they may not know how to use Microsoft Project, because you should very rarely use constraints, and so those calendar icons in the indicators column should appear not very often. Okay, so that was one of the first things to cover. We now know all about the different types of durations, and you've learned about how to split the task or split the screen so you got a task linking dashboard. The only thing that leaves is the different task linking types. There's 4 of them, which makes sense. There's 4 different ways to link a task. And what always throws everybody is finish to start is the baton effect. The runner before me has to finish before I can start. And most people go, well, don't you do things start to finish? No. Task schedules are finish to start. That's the common link type. So the next link type is, I'm going to create a blank screen here, is the start to start link. Now what I'm going to demonstrate all 4 of these links with I'm going to do a garage building exercise. So first thing we do is we dig the foundation, we pour the concrete, it cures, then we build the garage. Okay, so digging the foundation takes a day, pouring the concrete takes a day, curing, let's say it takes 3 days, and it's going to take a week to build the garage. And you go, okay, we're going to start this in October. So you go to project information, you scroll out to October, you start it on the 7th, and you go, well, this is easy. These are all going to happen in order, so you highlight them all, you go to the task tab, and you hit the link button. And then you realize, oh, I've got to order the lumber. And from the time you order it till it arrives takes, say, 2 days. So if I call Monday morning, they're going to have that lumber to me by Wednesday morning. All right, so, and you look at it and you go, well, the successor to ordering the lumber is building the garage. And most of you will look at that and go, well, there's a problem there. You can't just let that stuff sit on the ground. All right, so the best way to use the other link types, in my mind, is for just-in-time type deliveries. All right, so I'm going to split my screen here. One way you can use a start-to-start link is with respect to what we have here. All right, so I changed the link type to start-to-start. And if you watch the videos, you go, you've just run into that, which way is the wind blowing? That little holding hand's on the wrong end of its successor, so it's pushing it all the way back to the beginning. So one way to fix that is to move that link over to the other side. Alright, so now we've got the lumber order tied to building the garage, but you got a problem. It's not happening. It's happening too late. So you go, well, all I need to do here is put in -2 days as the lead time, and there you go. If I place that order on Thursday morning, it's going to be there the following Monday. Now, that is a way to use start to start. Believe it or not, I never use start to start, really. I used to use it a lot. But if I need something to start at the same time, I just use successor links to do it. And one of the problems with using a start to start link as a way to have just-in-time deliveries is what happens if the lumber ordering time goes to 3 days. In other words, you call in and say, hey, it's now taking 3 days to do it. Well, you've got to not only adjust this, but you've got to adjust the lag time. So you've got 2 things you've got to fiddle with. Now, say you're using a different type of concrete, it's going to take longer to cure. It still adjusts automatically, but the start-to-start approach takes a little bit more maintenance to keep things arriving in time. All right, so that's one way to use start-to-start. Another way to solve this problem would be with a finish-to-finish link. Now the problem here is it's not finishing at the same time you're building the garage. You have to think, okay, what comes before building the garage? Well, it's the concrete has to cure. So your finish-to-finish link has to be with something that precedes the building of the garage. That's a great way to do just-in-time deliveries, but you've got to think a little harder to get to that. So I'm going over and over this just-in-time delivery approach to drive home the fact that the typical use of different types of links basically in most project schedules becomes this: you need something to arrive just in time. Now, through years of using Project, I've started out using start to start with the negative lag, found that too much maintenance, then got the aha effect, oh, just use finish to finish. That's okay, but I tend to these days come to using the start to finish link type. So I end up going with the 4SF link approach. And then if I have to daisy chain even further things, determine yard, I'm chaining them off as I go. So one of the complaints I get about using Microsoft Project out of the box is, well, I've got a Christmas party and I want to schedule things going backwards. And everybody wants to go into project information and switch it to scheduling from the finish date. Not a good thing to do. No books out there. There's very few people that know how to use Microsoft Project that way. Much easier ways is use the start to finish link and chain them back. I've covered a lot of material tonight. Went through it extremely quickly. I hope that was a good reinforcement. Anybody have any comments? Did that help? Was it too fast? Would you like to see more examples on this? Okay, thank you, Stan. That's the type of feedback I was looking for. Yeah, the webinars help after you've watched the videos, and that's basically the approach to the class. We're hoping to build up to the all-day class. I'll go through a very quick summary of the different sections, and then in the afternoon we're going to do a simulation exercise. It's based on a real project scheduling problem, and hopefully that will reinforce and cement all of the skills you've learned through the course. And the effect I've seen in the past, and again, it's taken me years to develop this course, is by cutting out a lot of the extraneous stuff and focusing on the key items you need in creating a schedule. It actually makes people better users of Microsoft Project. The good thing is, with Udemy, you'll have these videos forever. You can watch them later on. Here's a value add tip. Sometimes it's easier to see the Gantt bars if you add grid lines. It's very easy to add grid lines. Just over in the Gantt bar section, right click on a section where you're not on a Gantt bar row or Gantt bar itself. Click grid lines and just click, let's go with dash lines for the Gantt bar rows, and there you go. It makes it a little easier to see across the screen. Let me give you another value add on, suppose you are going to have a milestone task. We'll call it done, and its predecessor, of course, is going to be build the garage. And as soon as you put in a 0, it makes a task a milestone. If you don't want the date on the right side of the milestone, simple way to change it. You just go to the Format tab. It's not obvious. It's simple, but it's not obvious. You have to pick the Format drop down, and you're going to format the bar. Even though a milestone isn't a bar, it's a diamond. It's under the bar style. It's under the bar command to change it. You get this unusual dialog box, and the place to get rid of the finish date on the bar is to go to the bar tab, bar text tab, and you can simply highlight and delete. I think I'm going to have to backspace this out the field it has in there for the style. Click OK, and there you go. The bar text is gone. Now, if you're paying attention, you may have realized also on an individual bar you could put something to the left, to the right, above it, below it, inside it, but you get the idea. You can add in dates to any, not only a milestone bar, but any other individual bar in your project schedule. Okay, one last tip again with the split screen. One of my favorite tricks is to right click in the lower pane, switch to the notes option, and I am always putting in notes on my project schedules just because there's so much to remember. It just makes it easier. So in this case, on the 9th of July, I changed the bar format for a milestone, FYI. Or if I put in a constraint, I will type it in. Or if I get information on from one of my team members, I will put that in the project schedule or in the notes section. So it's a great way to document. The other thing is notes, of course, can hold almost any type of information. Here's a hyperlink. Let's go Menards, since maybe that's where I'm buying my lumber. That's actually a link to that website, and it's in my notes. Next week we cover the all-important critical path method and the outlining feature. Critical path method is the scheduling algorithm that Microsoft Project uses. It was actually invented by Booz Allen Hamilton back in World War II in the Manhattan Project. They had some very smart guys, of course, trying to work on the bomb back in World War II, and they needed to do a way to keep everybody organized so they could finish as soon as possible because of the importance of it, and they invented the critical path method. That's the heart of scheduling a Microsoft project. There are other scheduling algorithms out there. One of the more popular ones is called the critical chain method by Dr. Elihu Goldratt. That is a totally different approach to scheduling. It focuses on not critical tasks, but critical resources. There's several companies that have found a great deal of benefit from using the critical chain method. There's actually add-on modules for the critical chain method for Microsoft Project. Going through something like critical chain is way beyond the complexities I'm trying to cover with the Streamlined course. Critical path method is sophisticated mathematics, but when you watch the videos, you'll get it. You'll understand which are the key fields to watch, and you'll understand why the critical path method is so important to scheduling in Microsoft Project. And if you really get excited about that, you may want to go to a website called At Risk. There we go. Palisade.com/risk project. They have a very slick Monte Carlo add-in for a Microsoft project. If you need to statistically assess what is the most probable finish date of your project based on the natural standard deviation and variance in your duration entries, this is an excellent tool to really ramp up the sophistication of Microsoft Project. It still uses the critical path method, but it also lets you put in if-then chain links into your project schedules. If I was in a construction industry where there was incredible penalties for missing projects, I might want to look at that sort of product. Okay, the dogs are telling me they want to go out, so I'm going to have to shut down, folks. Thank you again, and take care. See you next week.